I couldn't stop staring at the floral arrangement on my kitchen counter. The vibrant colors and sweet fragrance filled the air, a stark contrast to the sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. It was my 65th birthday, but instead of feeling joyful, I felt a familiar sense of dread. "Happy birthday, Mom!" Ethan's voice rang through the phone, warm and cheerful. "Rachel and I wanted to make sure you had something special to brighten up your day." "Thank you, honey," I replied, my voice strained. "It's beautiful. We're so sorry we couldn't be there in person, but we can't wait to see you at Mia's engagement party this weekend." As Ethan continued chatting, my gaze shifted to the other card lying on the counter, a simple envelope bearing Ryan's neat handwriting. Swallowing hard, I opened it to find a generic happy birthday message signed by his wife, Lila. I should have known better than to expect more. Later that evening, I mustered the courage to call Lila and thank her for the card. But the moment she answered, her condescending tone cut through me like a knife. "Hazel, darling," she drawled. "How lovely of you to call." "Thank you for the birthday card, Lila. That was very thoughtful of you." "Well, I certainly couldn't let the day go by unnoticed, could I?" she said with a forced laugh. "Although I must admit I'm surprised you're still around to celebrate another year." My heart sank. "Excuse me?" "You're a disgrace, Hazel. A junior high school dropout at a fancy party. You're an embarrassment to all of us." The words hit me like a slap in the face, and I felt the familiar sting of tears welling up. "What did you say?" "You heard me," she sneered. "You're a poor woman living on Social Security. I don't want anything to do with you." The line went dead, and I was left clutching the phone, my body trembling with a mixture of anger and anguish. How could she be so cruel, and on my birthday, no less? But deep down, I knew this wasn't the first time Lila had belittled me. Her disdain for my humble upbringing and lack of formal education had been simmering for years, a constant source of tension within the family. As I sat alone in my modest home, surrounded by the trappings of a life well lived, I made a silent vow. This time, Lila had gone too far. I would no longer remain a silent spectator as she disrespected and humiliated me. It was time to take a stand and reclaim the dignity I deserved. The weekend of Mia's engagement party arrived, and I found myself standing in the lavish gardens of the family estate, surrounded by perfectly manicured hedges and meticulously arranged floral displays. It was a world far removed from my own, a stark reminder of the gulf that separated my life from that of my wealthy children. As I smoothed the fabric of my simple sundress, a sense of unease washed over me. I knew Lila would be in attendance, and the memory of her cruel words still stung like an open wound. "Hazel, darling," a familiar voice called out, dripping with false sweetness. "You made it." I turned to see Lila sauntering towards me, her designer gown hugging her slim figure in a way that seemed to mock my own modest attire. "Lila," I greeted her, forcing a polite smile. "You look lovely." Her eyes narrowed as she took in my appearance, her lips curling into a disdainful sneer. "Well, isn't that quaint?" Before I could respond, she continued, her words laced with venom. "Really, Hazel, you should have made more of an effort. This is a special occasion after all." I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment, but I refused to let her see how deeply her words cut. "I'm sure Mia and her fiancé will be thrilled regardless of what I'm wearing." Lila let out a derisive laugh, drawing the attention of nearby guests. "Oh, Hazel, always so naive. Do you really think anyone cares about your presence here? You're nothing but a sad, uneducated relic from a bygone era." My hands balled into fists at my sides, but before I could respond, Ryan appeared, his expression dark. "Lila, that's enough," he said, his voice low and warning. But Lila was undeterred, her cruelty seemingly fueled by an insatiable need to humiliate me. "What's the matter, Ryan?" she taunted. "Can't handle the truth? Your mother is a disgrace, a poor excuse for a woman who couldn't even finish high school." The words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, and I felt the weight of 1,000 judging eyes upon me. My vision blurred with tears, and I fought the urge to flee, not to escape the humiliation that threatened to consume me. But then a familiar voice cut through the tension, strong and unwavering. "That's enough, Lila," Ethan said, stepping forward with Rachel at his side. "You've gone too far." Lila's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. But before she could respond, Ethan continued, his voice ringing out across the garden. You think you're so superior with your fancy job and designer clothes, he said, shaking his head. But the truth is, you're nothing but a bitter, insecure woman who has to tear others down to feel good about herself. A hush fell over the crowd as Ethan's words sank in, and I saw Lila's face contort with rage. How dare you, she spat, her composure crumbling. But Ethan wasn't finished. You want to know the real truth, Lila? This entire estate, everything you see around you, belongs to our mother. She's the one who made shrewd investments over the years, building a fortune that you could only dream of. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and I saw Lila's eyes widen in disbelief. You're lying, she hissed, but her voice wavered with uncertainty. Ethan shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. Believe what you want, Lila, but the truth is out, and it's time you showed my mother the respect she deserves. As the guests erupted into murmurs, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, replaced by a surge of pride and vindication. For too long, I had allowed Lila's cruelty to diminish me, but no more. This was my moment, and I would savor every second of it. The murmurs and whispers that followed Ethan's revelation seemed to fade into the background as I watched Lila's face contort with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Her carefully cultivated mask of superiority had cracked, revealing the ugly truth beneath. You're lying, she spat, her eyes darting between Ethan and me. This is some kind of sick joke. But Ethan remained unfazed, his expression one of calm resolve. Believe what you want, Lila, but the truth is out there for anyone who cares to look. Lila opened her mouth to respond, but before she could utter a word, the sound of clinking glass filled the air. All eyes turned towards the raised platform where Mia's fiancé, Jake, stood, a champagne flute in his hand. If I could have everyone's attention, please, he called out, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. As the guests fell silent, Jake's gaze swept over the assembled group, finally settling on Lila. A small smile played on his lips as he raised his glass in a mock toast. I'd like to propose a toast, he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm, to Lila, the epitome of grace and humility. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd, and I saw Lila's face flush with embarrassment. After all, Jake continued, what could be more admirable than a woman who takes such pride in belittling and humiliating others, especially those who have sacrificed so much for her own comfort and privilege? The words hung in the air, sharp and pointed, and I felt a surge of satisfaction as Lila shifted uncomfortably, her eyes downcast. To Lila, Jake said, raising his glass higher, may her arrogance and cruelty serve as a reminder to us all of the kind of person we should strive never to become. A chorus of laughter and scattered applause filled the air, and I couldn't help but join in, reveling in the sweet taste of vindication. But Lila wasn't one to accept defeat gracefully. With a snarl of rage, she snatched a champagne flute from a nearby tray and hurled it towards Jake, the glass shattering against the platform in a shower of sparkling shards. Gasps of shock rippled through the crowd, and I felt Ryan's hand on my arm, steadying me. How dare you? Lila shrieked, her voice shrill and unhinged. You're all pathetic, groveling at the feet of this uneducated nobody. Her gaze fell on me, her eyes burning with hatred. You think you've won, Hazel? You think you're better than me? You're nothing but a poor, sad excuse for a mother, and I pity your children for having to endure your presence in their lives. The words cut deep, reigniting the familiar sting of shame and inadequacy that Lila had so expertly cultivated over the years. But this time, something was different. This time, I felt a newfound strength, a resolve that had been forged in the fires of her cruelty. Squaring my shoulders, I stepped forward, my gaze locked with hers. You're right, Lila, I said, my voice steady and unwavering. I may not have had the same educational opportunities as you, but I've learned something far more valuable, the importance of kindness, humility, and respect for others. Lila scoffed, but I pressed on, emboldened by the supportive murmurs of the crowd. You see, true wealth isn't measured by the size of your bank account or the designer labels you wear. It's measured by the quality of your character, the depth of your compassion, and the legacy you leave behind. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. And in that regard, Lila, you are the poorest of us all. A hush fell over the garden, broken only by the sound of Lila's ragged breathing. For a moment, I thought she might lash out again, but then her shoulders slumped, and she turned on her heel, disappearing into the crowd without another word. As the guests erupted into applause, I felt a sense of victory wash over me. The battle had been won, and for the first time in my life, I had emerged victorious against the woman who had tormented me for so long. The aftermath of Lila's public humiliation hung heavy in the air, like a thick fog that refused to dissipate. As the guests slowly dispersed, murmuring amongst themselves, I found myself surrounded by a small cluster of family members, their expressions ranging from shock to admiration. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Ryan said, his brow furrowed with concern. "I had no idea Lila was capable of such cruelty." I offered him a gentle smile, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "It's not your fault, dear. Lila has always had a way of hiding her true colors." Ethan stepped forward, his arm draped protectively around Rachel's shoulders. "You handled that situation with such grace and dignity, Mom. I'm proud of you." "Thank you, son," I replied, my heart swelling with gratitude. "But I couldn't have done it without your support." As the others chimed in with words of encouragement and praise, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd, her face etched with a mixture of shame and resolve. "Lila," Ryan said, his voice laced with a combination of sadness and anger. "What you did was inexcusable." Lila flinched, her gaze dropping to the ground. "I know," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "And I'm sorry." The words seemed to hang in the air, their sincerity questionable. But before anyone could respond, Lila lifted her head, her eyes meeting mine with a newfound determination. "Hazel, I owe you a profound apology," she said, her tone surprisingly steady. "For years I've treated you with disrespect and cruelty, and I can't begin to justify my actions." She paused, taking a deep breath. "The truth is, I was jealous of you, of the love and admiration your children have for you, of the strength and resilience you've shown in the face of adversity. I allowed my own insecurities and pettiness to blind me to the remarkable woman you truly are." I blinked, taken aback by the unexpected honesty in her words. But before I could respond, Lila continued, her voice growing stronger with each syllable. "Today, you showed me what true dignity and courage look like, and I was humbled by your grace under fire. You are a far better person than I could ever hope to be, and for that, I am deeply sorry." A hush fell over our small group, the weight of Lila's admission hanging heavily in the air. I searched her eyes for any hint of deception, but found only a rawness and vulnerability that I had never seen before. Finally, I nodded, offering her a small, tentative smile. "Thank you, Lila. Your words mean a lot to me." Lila returned the nod, her shoulders sagging with what seemed like relief. But before she could say anything else, Ryan stepped forward, his expression grim. "Lila, I appreciate your apology, but words aren't enough," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Your actions today, your cruelty towards my mother, were unforgivable." Lila's eyes widened, her mouth opening to protest, but Ryan held up a hand, silencing her. "I can't continue to stand by and watch you disrespect and humiliate the woman who brought me into this world, who sacrificed so much for our family," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "It's over, Lila. I'm filing for divorce." The words hung in the air like a death knell, and I saw Lila's face crumple, her carefully constructed facade finally shattering. Without another word, she turned and fled, disappearing into the gathering dusk. As the weight of Ryan's decision settled over us, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. While a part of me mourned the dissolution of my son's marriage, a larger part couldn't help but feel vindicated, finally free from the toxic grip of Lila's cruelty. Reaching out, I pulled Ryan into a tight embrace, whispering words of love and support into his ear. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, our family would face them together, united and unbreakable. In the days that followed Mia's disastrous engagement party, a palpable tension hung over the family like a thick fog. The once pristine estate felt tainted, its grandeur overshadowed by the weight of Lila's actions and the aftermath of her public humiliation. As I sat in the quiet solitude of my modest home sipping a cup of tea, I found myself replaying the events of that fateful day over and over in my mind. The look of anguish on Ryan's face as he declared his intention to divorce Lila was seared into my memory, a painful reminder of the collateral damage inflicted by her cruelty. A gentle knock at the door jolted me from my reverie, and I rose to answer it, my heart fluttering with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. "Ryan," I breathed, taking in the sight of my eldest son standing on my doorstep, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He offered me a weary smile, his eyes rimmed with fatigue. "Hey, Mom, can I come in?" "Of course, honey," I replied, stepping aside to usher him into the familiar warmth of my living room. As Ryan sank onto the well-worn couch, I studied him carefully, noting the lines of worry etched into his face. It was clear that the events of the past few days had taken a toll on him, both emotionally and physically. "I couldn't stay there," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not after everything that happened." I nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The estate, once a symbol of our family's prosperity, had become a haunting reminder of Lila's viciousness and the fractures she had created within our once tight-knit clan. "You did the right thing, Ryan," I said, reaching out to squeeze his hand reassuringly. "Lila's behavior was unacceptable, and you deserve better." Ryan's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and he nodded, swallowing hard. I never thought it would come to this, you know? I loved her, Mom. Despite everything, a part of me still does." My heart ached for him, for the pain and heartbreak that he was enduring. As a mother, all I wanted was to shield him from the cruelties of the world, to protect him from the kind of hurt that Lila had inflicted upon us all. "I know, sweetheart," I murmured, pulling him into a gentle embrace. "But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes we have to put our own well-being first, even if it means walking away from someone who can't treat us with the respect and kindness we deserve." Ryan nodded, his body trembling slightly as he fought back tears. In that moment, I saw not the successful businessman or the doting husband he had once been, but a little boy in need of his mother's comfort and guidance. As we sat together, enveloped in the quiet stillness of my living room, I felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over me. This was my chance to be the rock that my son needed, to provide him with the unwavering support and love that had been so sorely lacking in his marriage. Over the next few weeks, Ryan slowly began to rebuild his life, piece by piece. He threw himself into his work, channeling his energy and focus into projects that had once taken a backseat to Lila's demands and expectations. And through it all, I was there, a constant presence by his side, offering a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on whenever he needed it. Meanwhile, the rift between Lila and the rest of the family only seemed to widen. Ethan and Rachel made it clear that they stood firmly in my corner, their loyalty unwavering in the face of Lila's transgressions. Even Mia, who had once idolized her glamorous aunt, began to see her in a new light. Her youthful admiration replaced by a simmering resentment for the way Lila had treated her beloved grandmother. As for Lila herself, she retreated into the shadows, her once vibrant presence reduced to a mere whisper on the fringes of our family gatherings. Occasionally I would catch a glimpse of her, her eyes downcast and her shoulders slumped, a far cry from the haughty woman who had once ruled over us all with an iron fist. And in those fleeting moments, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for her, a reminder that even the most vile of actions often stem from a place of deep insecurity and pain. But as the months passed, that pity gradually gave way to a sense of triumph and vindication. For too long, I had allowed Lila's cruelty to dictate the narrative of my life, to diminish my sense of self-worth and the love I shared with my children and grandchildren. Now, however, the tables had turned. Lila's mask had been ripped away, exposing the ugliness that lay beneath, and I had emerged from the ashes of her resentment stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I looked towards the future, I knew that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome, but I also knew that I would face them head-on, surrounded by the unwavering love and support of my family, the true measure of wealth that Lila could never hope to understand. In the months that followed, life seemed to settle into a new rhythm, one that no longer included Lila's toxic presence. Ryan had officially filed for divorce, severing the final ties that bound him to his former wife's cruelty. As for me, I found solace in the newfound closeness with my sons and their families. Ethan and Rachel were constant fixtures in my life, their love and support a balm for the wounds inflicted by Lila's vicious words. Even Mia, once so enamored with her glamorous aunt, had grown to see the true depth of Lila's ugliness. She now regarded me with a newfound respect and admiration, her youthful infatuation replaced by a genuine appreciation for the strength and resilience I had shown in the face of adversity. It was during one of our weekly family dinners that I first caught wind of the rumors swirling around Lila's professional life. Ethan, ever the protective son, had been keeping a watchful eye on her movements, determined to ensure she faced the consequences of her actions. "Word around the office is that Lila's been demoted," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "Apparently her little stunt at Mia's engagement party didn't go over too well with the higher-ups." I felt a pang of satisfaction at the news, but quickly pushed it aside, unwilling to stoop to Lila's level of pettiness. "I see," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Well, actions do have consequences." Ethan nodded, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "That's not all. I've heard whispers about some financial troubles, too. Seems like her lavish lifestyle might have caught up with her." A part of me wanted to revel in Lila's downfall, to savor the sweet taste of revenge. But another, more rational part reminded me that such thoughts were unbecoming, a reflection of the very bitterness that had once consumed Lila herself. As the weeks passed, the rumors only seemed to intensify. Lila's once pristine reputation was quickly unraveling, her fall from grace fueled by her own hubris and arrogance. It was during one of my weekly visits to the local grocery store that I caught my first glimpse of her in months. She was standing in the checkout line, her hair disheveled and her clothing rumpled, a far cry from the polished image she had once so carefully cultivated. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of something in her gaze, shame perhaps, or regret. But as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by a familiar mask of defiance. I nodded curtly in her direction, offering a small, tight-lipped smile before turning away. In that moment, I realized that I no longer harbored any ill will towards Lila. Her actions had spoken for themselves, and the consequences she now faced were of her own making. As I made my way home, my mind couldn't help but wander back to that brief encounter. I thought of the lavish lifestyle Lila had once enjoyed, the designer clothes and expensive cars that had once been the trappings of her success. And yet, in the end, it was all a facade, a carefully constructed illusion that had crumbled under the weight of her own hubris and cruelty. It was a sobering reminder that true wealth lies not in material possessions or social status, but in the quality of one's character and the depth of the relationships we cultivate with those around us. And as I reflected on the unwavering love and support of my family, I knew that in that regard, I was truly the wealthiest woman of all. As the dust settled on the aftermath of Lila's downfall, a newfound sense of unity began to take root within our family. It was as if the toxic cloud that had once hung over us had finally dissipated, allowing us to breathe freely once more. It was during one of our weekly dinners that Ryan broached the subject of the family estate, the very symbol of Lila's cruelty and the catalyst for her public humiliation. "Mom," he said, his voice solemn yet resolute, "I think it's time we did something about the estate." I felt a flicker of apprehension at his words, the memories of that fateful day still fresh in my mind. But before I could respond, Ryan continued, "For too long, we've allowed Lila's actions to cast a shadow over our family's legacy," he said, his gaze sweeping across the table to include Ethan, Rachel, and Mia. "That ends now." Ethan nodded, a look of understanding passing between the brothers. "What did you have in mind?" Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes meeting mine with a newfound determination. "I want to take over the management of the estate," he said firmly. "But not just for our own benefit. I want to restore it to its former glory, to honor the vision and hard work that you put into building it, Mom." I felt a lump form in my throat, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and gratitude. For so long, I had kept my role in the estate's creation a closely guarded secret, unwilling to draw attention to myself or risk incurring Lila's wrath. But now, with her influence finally broken, I felt a sense of liberation, a freedom to embrace the accomplishments that had once been overshadowed by her cruelty. "Ryan, I don't know what to say," I stammered, my voice thick with emotion. Ethan reached across the table, clasping my hand in his own. "Say yes, Mom," he urged gently. "You've sacrificed so much for this family, and it's time we honored that sacrifice in the way it deserves." I looked around the table, taking in the faces of my children and grandchild, faces that radiated with love and admiration. In that moment, I knew that my decision had already been made. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "Yes, of course. Let's do this together as a family." A chorus of cheers and applause erupted around the table, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, replaced by a sense of purpose and determination. In the weeks that followed, Ryan threw himself into the task of restoring the estate to its former glory. He pored over financial records and blueprints, meticulously planning every aspect of the renovation and restoration process. And through it all, I was there by his side, offering guidance and insight, sharing the stories and memories that had once been silenced by Lila's cruelty. As the work progressed, a sense of excitement began to build within our family. Ethan and Rachel eagerly pitched in, lending their talents and energy to the project, while Mia reveled in the opportunity to be a part of something so deeply rooted in our family's history. It was during one of our weekly planning sessions that Ryan made a suggestion that took me by surprise. "Mom," he said, his eyes shining with a mix of pride and determination, "I think it's time we set the record straight." I furrowed my brow, unsure of his meaning. "What do you mean?" Ryan leaned forward, his gaze intense and unwavering. "I want to hold a press conference, a public event where we can share the true story of this estate. Your story." My heart skipped a beat, a flicker of apprehension flickering within me. For so long, I had shied away from the spotlight, content to let my contributions go unnoticed. But as I looked around the room, taking in the faces of my loved ones, I realized that their support and belief in me were stronger than any fear or insecurity I might harbor. "Okay," I said, nodding slowly. "Let's do it." In the days leading up to the press conference, a flurry of activity consumed our lives. Ryan worked tirelessly to coordinate every detail, ensuring that the event would be a true celebration of our family's resilience and my legacy. And as the day finally arrived, I found myself standing behind a podium, surrounded by the familiar faces of my children and grandchild, their unwavering love and support, a constant source of strength. As the cameras flashed and the reporters eagerly scribbled notes, I took a deep breath and began to tell my story. The tale of a humble woman who had defied the odds, building a fortune through hard work, determination, and a keen eye for opportunity. With each word, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, the burden of secrecy and shame that had once weighed me down dissipating like a morning fog. And as I spoke, I couldn't help but steal glances at Ryan, Ethan, and the rest of my family, their faces beaming with pride and admiration. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, a united front, bound by the unbreakable bonds of love, respect, and a shared legacy that no amount of cruelty or jealousy could ever tarnish. The weeks leading up to my 66th birthday were a whirlwind of activity, as the family rallied together to plan a grand celebration, one that would not only honor the milestone, but also serve as a celebration of our newfound unity and the restoration of the family estate. As I stepped through the ornate gates that led onto the immaculately groomed grounds, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe wash over me. The once neglected gardens had been meticulously tended to, bursting with vibrant blooms that seemed to radiate a newfound vibrancy. "Mom!" Mia's voice rang out, and I turned to see her hurrying towards me, her face alight with excitement. "You made it!" I chuckled, pulling her into a warm embrace. "Of course, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss this for the world." Mia beamed, taking my hand and leading me further onto the grounds. "Wait until you see what we've done with the place," she gushed. "It's like something out of a fairy tale." And indeed, as we rounded the corner, I was greeted by a sight that took my breath away. The vast lawn had been transformed into a veritable wonderland, with twinkling lights strung between the trees and elegant tables adorned with delicate floral arrangements. "Oh, Mia," I breathed, my eyes drinking in the beauty that surrounded me. "It's absolutely stunning." "We wanted to make sure your birthday was extra special this year," a familiar voice chimed in, and I turned to see Ethan and Rachel approaching, their arms laden with gifts. "After everything you've done for us, for this family, it's the least we could do," Rachel added, her warm smile mirroring the affection in her words. I felt a lump form in my throat, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and appreciation. Before I could respond, however, the sound of laughter and music filled the air, drawing my attention to the gathering crowd of guests. As I made my way through the throng of well-wishers, exchanging hugs and accepting heartfelt congratulations, I couldn't help but marvel at the transformation that had taken place. Just a year ago, this very estate had been the site of such pain and turmoil, a battleground where Lila's cruelty had threatened to tear our family apart. But now, the air was filled with joy and celebration, the weight of the past lifted by the strength of our love and resilience. It was during the height of the festivities that Ryan took the stage, his face aglow with pride and affection. As he raised his glass in a toast, a hush fell over the crowd, all eyes fixed upon him. "To my incredible mother," he began, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "A woman whose strength, determination, and unwavering love have been the bedrock upon which our family has been built." A chorus of cheers and applause erupted, and I felt my cheeks flush with a mixture of humility and gratitude. "Today, we not only celebrate her birthday," Ryan continued, "but also the triumph of her spirit over adversity, and the legacy she has created for all of us to cherish and carry forward." His gaze swept over the assembled guests, lingering on each member of our family with a warmth that spoke volumes. "So raise your glasses, my friends, and join me in honoring the true matriarch of our family, a woman whose resilience, grace, and unwavering love have inspired us all." As the crowd erupted into a thunderous ovation, I felt tears of joy prick at the corners of my eyes. In that moment, all the pain and heartache of the past seemed to melt away, replaced by a profound sense of gratitude and contentment. Later, as the party wound down and the guests began to disperse, I found myself wandering the grounds, basking in the tranquility of the evening. It was then that Rachel approached, cradling a small bundle in her arms. "Mom," she said softly, her eyes shining with a mix of joy and pride, "I'd like you to meet your newest grandchild." As I peered down at the tiny face nestled against Rachel's chest, a wave of emotion washed over me. This precious new life, a symbol of hope and renewal, was a testament to the enduring strength of our family, a strength that had been forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the bonds of unconditional love. Reaching out, I gently traced the curve of the baby's cheek, marveling at the soft perfection of their skin. "Hello, little one," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "Welcome to the family." In that moment, as I held my grandchild close, surrounded by the love and warmth of my family, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united, resilient, and unbreakable. For in the end, that was the true legacy I hoped to leave behind, not one of material wealth or fleeting success, but of love, courage, and the unwavering belief that even in the darkest of times, the light of hope and redemption can never be extinguished. In a world where I thought love was a language I'd never speak, his words, "Would you consider going out with me?" struck a chord I never knew I had. I stared blankly at Jude, stunned by his bold invitation. Me, the office recluse, being asked out by one of our most personable clients? It seemed unfathomable. "I know this seems out of the blue," he continued with a warm smile, "but I've wanted to get to know you better for a while now. You intrigue me." I felt my cheeks flush as I scrambled for words. My instinct was to politely decline and retreat to my safe solitary office, but something in his gentle eyes chipped away at my guarded facade. I'd love to," I managed, the words escaping before I could overanalyze their implication. His face lit up with pleasant surprise. "Yeah, great. Are you free Friday night?" I nodded, suddenly feeling shy as scattered memories of high school dances and my college roommates' many suitors flashed through my mind. My scant romantic history felt woefully inadequate preparation for an evening alone with Jude. As we exchanged numbers, planning the location and time, apprehension and excitement dueled within me. I had always admired Jude from afar, drawn to his affable confidence and easy charm. But I never imagined his interest would extend to someone like me, the office introvert who preferred headphones and spreadsheets to happy hours with colleagues. That Friday evening, I agonized over my outfit, changing 3 times before settling on a simple black dress and heels. I barely recognized my reflection, a far cry from the jeans and blouses I lived in at the office. As the Uber approached the restaurant, my nerves kicked into overdrive. "You can do this," I told myself. "Just make conversation." I was greeted by the scent of grilled meat and raucous laughter as I walked through the doors. The buzz of a Friday night crowd set my anxiety on edge. But then I spotted Jude waving at a small table nestled in a quiet corner. His smile eased my tension. "You look beautiful," he said, pulling out my chair. I lowered myself down, smoothing my dress self-consciously. "This place is really nice. Do you come here a lot?" I asked. As we fell into casual banter about local restaurants, my nervousness gradually gave way. Jude's presence was disarming, engaged but relaxed, funny but thoughtful. Our conversation drifted seamlessly from work to hobbies to childhood memories over steak frites and wine. I barely touched my food, too caught up in his entertaining stories to think about eating. Jude jumped from topic to topic with enthusiastic ease, while I mainly listened, interjecting occasional questions or reactions. Despite my tendency to avoid eye contact, I found myself stealing glances at his bright amber eyes as he spoke. After the plates were cleared, Jude glanced at his watch. "I didn't mean to keep you so late. I know it's a work night." "Oh, that's okay," I said quickly. In truth, I had barely noticed the passing hours in his company. As we walked out to catch our Ubers, Jude gently brushed his hand against mine. The subtle contact sent a spark through my skin. "I had a wonderful time, Alara," he said softly. "Would you want to go out again next weekend?" I nodded, suddenly unable to find my voice. As my Uber pulled up, Jude leaned in, planting a delicate kiss on my cheek. "Good night," he whispered before turning to leave. I watched him disappear into the night, my fingers touching the spot his lips had grazed. The chord he struck within me now hummed with new life. I knew in that electric moment that my world would never be the solitary place it once was. Our bliss lasted only a few short years before life threw its first major obstacle at us. Barely 2 years into our marriage, Jude's promising startup collapsed almost overnight, the victim of embezzlement by a duplicitous business partner. I still remember Jude's ashen face when he told me the news over the phone. "It's all gone, Alara. Everything." His voice cracked as he explained how his conniving co-founder had drained their accounts before disappearing without a trace. My heart ached for my kind-hearted husband, knowing how much blood and sweat he had poured into his company. I rushed to meet him, enveloping his slumped frame in my arms. "I'm so sorry, Jude," I whispered, holding him tightly. "We'll get through this. I promise." In the months that followed, we slowly adjusted to our new financial reality. The lease on our trendy apartment was not renewed. Designer brands and upscale restaurants were replaced with thrift stores and home cooking. Jude fell into a period of despair, struggling to pull himself out of bed most mornings, much less send out job applications. Eventually, our dwindling savings forced my hand. One late night, Jude came home to find me sitting solemnly at our kitchen table. "We can't avoid it anymore. One of us needs a steady job with benefits," I said gently. Jude stared at the floor silently before sinking into the chair across from me. "I know," he finally replied, his voice laced with shame. "I'm trying, Alara. These past few months have been difficult." I reached for his hand reassuringly. "Let me job hunt for a while. My background may make it easier for me to find something quickly." Though it wounded his pride, Jude eventually conceded. Within a few weeks, I leveraged my financial analysis skills into a mid-level position at a thriving corporation. Meanwhile, Jude half-heartedly submitted applications, his enthusiasm still dampened. Upon receiving my first paycheck, I surprised Jude with dinner at our favorite upscale restaurant, but instead of delighting him, the extravagant evening seemed to underscore his feelings of failure. "We can't afford this, Alara," he said sullenly, eyeing the polished surroundings. "Not on an administrative assistant's salary." Stung by his thoughtless words, I bit my tongue to restrain a retort. Later, I tried gently broaching his comment, but Jude refused to discuss it further. As I drifted to sleep that night, an uneasy feeling stirred within me. The dynamics of our relationship were shifting, but to what end I did not yet know. Over the next year, Jude cycled through short-lived contract jobs while my career advanced rapidly. Each of my promotions and pay raises seemed to drive the wedge between us in deeper. Pleasant dinners would suddenly flip into moody silences if I mentioned work. Offhand comments about my lucky break stung. But Jude's biggest blow came on the heels of my latest achievement, a senior manager role that nearly doubled my prior income. I arrived home thrilled to share the good news, only to find Jude pacing angrily. "I can't keep doing this," he erupted before I could even speak. "Watching you succeed so effortlessly while I flounder. Why did I bother with college when you make twice my income without even trying?" I stood speechless, stricken by his verbal attack. "Jude, that's not fair," I finally responded, fighting back tears. "My job requires 80-hour weeks and extensive travel. You know I would happily trade places." "Oh, please," he scoffed. "You love the fancy office and business trips. Don't pretend this hasn't been the best thing that ever happened to your career." As his cruel words echoed through our silent apartment, an image of the gentle man I married flickered in my mind. The man now standing before me, twisted by envy and pride, felt like a stranger. My heart broke realizing the Jude I loved may be gone forever. The months following Jude's outburst dragged on, our relationship strained by unspoken hurts. My demanding job kept me traveling frequently, leaving little time to mend the widening rift between us. During a rare extended stay home, I was surprised to find a sharply dressed Jude waiting with 2 glasses of wine when I returned one evening. "Congratulations are in order," he declared, handing me a glass. "I started a new position today, at Richardson Financial." I stared blankly, struggling to process this sudden news after so many months adrift. Jude continued explaining his role as a junior broker at the prestigious firm while I nodded mutely. "This is wonderful news," I finally managed. "What prompted you to apply there specifically?" Jude refilled our glasses, his mood buoyant. "I realized I couldn't sulk forever, and I know Richardson was on your dream company's list from business school." I detected an unspoken message in his pointed remark. By choosing a firm I admired, perhaps Jude hoped to prevent any envy on my part. I brushed the implication aside, focusing on my relief at this positive development. Over celebratory pasta, Jude enthusiastically outlined his plans to quickly climb the corporate ladder. I smiled encouragingly, though uncertainty lurked at the back of my mind. Jude's checkered employment history left me skeptical of his staying power in the notoriously cutthroat environment, but I kept silent, not wanting to dampen his fledgling confidence. "Well, I'm off to bed," Jude said, kissing my cheek after dinner. 5 a.m. comes early when you actually have somewhere to be." I awoke the next morning to find Jude already gone. A quickly scrawled note on the counter wished me a nice day. As I surveyed the remnants of last night's feast, I felt a palpable emptiness. I longed for the days when lazy Saturday mornings meant lingering in bed together before tackling chores or enjoying leisurely brunch dates. Over the next few months, Jude and I mostly passed like ships in the night. My global travel increased substantially with a major product launch, leaving me perpetually jet-lagged. Meanwhile, Jude rapidly advanced at Richardson Financial, regularly working 12-plus-hour days. We traded quick voicemails and the occasional takeout dinner, too exhausted for meaningful interaction. But slowly, our financial state improved with Jude's rising income. We moved into a more spacious apartment closer to Richardson's headquarters. Jude leased a shiny BMW to match his new professional persona. My pay bumps had bought us time, but now Jude's earnings afforded us true stability. I noticed small changes, too. Jude's expensive haircuts, new custom-tailored suits, and sudden golf habit with the guys from work. During my fleeting visits home, Jude entertained me with amusing corporate stories, though names and context often blurred together. "Richardson sure keeps you busy, I commented one night after Jude dismissed a call from a colleague. "Yeah, it's nonstop, but that's life in this industry," he replied. As he detailed his latest high-profile case, Jude's face glowed with vigor and pride. The shadow of resentment and defeat I had watched haunt him these past years finally lifted. My husband had returned, though in an unexpected form. With our careers firmly stabilized and finances on the rebound, I optimistically hoped our marriage, too, could now begin healing. Surely this new upward trajectory marked the end of our relationship woes. Or so my naive heart believed at the time. But unbeknownst to either of us, an unpredictable storm brewed just over the horizon, one that would change the course of our lives forever. I quit. Jude's fork halted midair, a bit of egg dangling precipitously. "You what?" I took a deep breath, grasping my mimosa tightly. "I quit my job as of today." Jude slowly lowered his fork to the plate with a gentle clink. I don't understand. Why would you quit without discussing it with me first? I know, I'm sorry, I replied. It was an impulsive decision, but the timing felt right. I went on to explain my growing disenchantment with the corporate rat race, the endless slog of meetings and metrics, losing sight of any real purpose. And then an email landed offering me a lucrative freelance financial writing position. Before I could overthink it, I resigned. Jude rubbed his temple, processing this bombshell development. I braced myself for criticism over my rash choice. Well, I support you, he finally said. I know how miserable all that travel made you. Just promise you won't become some starving artist now, he added with a wink. I laughed, relief washing over me. I make more per hour now than with a salary. We'll be fine. In my euphoria over dumping my corporate shackles, I failed to notice Jude's smile not quite reaching his eyes. Over the next few months, I settled happily into my new remote freelance role. The flexible schedule afforded me time to pursue photography and pottery classes, long-neglected passions. With Jude frequently working late, I cherished reconnecting with these creative interests. One evening, while crafting a vase, Jude arrived home unusually early, and not alone. I turned to find an immaculately dressed elderly woman clutching his arm. Alara, meet my mother Mara, Jude announced. She'll be staying with us a while. I froze, struggling to process this unexpected guest now surveying my clay-splattered apron with thinly veiled disdain. Jude had never once mentioned his mother coming to visit, much less live with us. Wonderful to meet you, I managed faintly. How long exactly was a while? In the uncomfortable days that followed, I learned Mara's husband had recently passed away after a long illness. According to Jude, the loss left her too fragile to care for their suburban home alone. I empathized with her grief, even as her imposing presence invaded our home. Mara scrutinized our apartment with pursed lips. The modern artwork, my orchid garden, Jude's beloved jazz vinyl collection. Everything seemed to offend her traditional sensibilities. Without asking, she rearranged furniture to allow proper flow, and stocked our kitchen with bizarre health concoctions. Worst of all, Mara's constant, unsolicited advice infuriated me. She critiqued my writing career as a flighty pastime, suggested I dress more modestly, and outright condemned the premarital intimacy Jude and I shared, in our own home. I urged Jude to intervene about his mother's behavior multiple times, but he merely shrugged, responding, "It's just her way. She means well." As Mara's presence infiltrated each room like an invasive species, I sensed my sanctuary dissolving. Lying awake at night, I listened anxiously to Jude reassuring his mother through the thin walls after every minor stressor. The man I once considered my closest confidant now reserved that role for the intruder down the hall who eyed me like a troublesome child. And somehow I had allowed this. The passive husband and domineering mother now controlled our home, while I willingly relinquished my power just to keep the peace. The realization churned a growing fury I could no longer contain. The shrill ringing of my cell phone jarred me from sleep. I fumbled groggily for the device, Jude's name flashing urgently on the screen. "Hello, Jude?" "Alara." His voice was strained with a chilling edge I'd never heard before. "The police just left. Get back here now." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, my groggy mind racing through possible emergencies. Sirens blaring past my hotel had awoken me just an hour ago. Were we robbed? Surely no mere household mishap warranted Jude's cryptic tone. I hurriedly dressed and raced home, pacing tensely as the Uber crawled through early morning traffic. I arrived to find an eerie quiet, no signs of forced entry or robbery. But the acidic scent of bleach hung cloyingly in the air. I moved cautiously through each room, ledgering the undisturbed valuables with confusion before noticing the bathroom. Harsh fluorescent light spilled into the hall from the ajar door. Inside, I gasped to discover blood smeared across the newly scrubbed tile walls. The metallic stench overwhelmed me. I clutched the doorway in horror. What had happened here? Just then Jude emerged, his shirt and hands still speckled with scarlet stains. Upon seeing me, his mouth twisted into a snarl. "There you are. This is your doing," he hissed, jabbing his finger toward the lurid scene. "I told the police what really happened, even covered up your rage tantrum, but if you ever lay hands on my mother again—" "What? Jude, I just got home. What on earth are you saying?" I cried. His bizarre accusation made no sense. But before I could plead further, Mara appeared behind Jude's shoulder, an exaggerated slump in her usually ramrod posture. "I tried so hard to keep the peace between you two," she whimpered pathetically. As Jude comforted his clearly unharmed mother, their distorted narrative finally registered. They had concocted this elaborate scene to frame me as unstable and violent. My hands curled involuntarily into fists as I marched toward Mara, ready to confront her deceit. Sensing imminent confrontation, Jude swiftly positioned himself between us. "Officer Costas allowed us to handle this discreetly, since Mother isn't pressing charges," he said. "But he assured me they'll be keeping close watch." I opened my mouth to refute Jude's outrageous threat, but stopped short. Their determination to paint me as an aggressor was suddenly clear. Engaging would only legitimize this infuriating fabrication. Without a word, I turned my back on them and retreated outside to calm my spiraling thoughts. Over the next week, Jude and Mara carried on with their fraudulent charade. She wore a wrist brace for her sprain, while neighbors and Jude's colleagues received anonymous warnings about my concerning temper. My existence became an endless gauntlet of thinly veiled antagonism and betrayal. Soon after, while enjoying a rare solitary afternoon, the doorbell's obnoxious chime broke my focus. I opened it reluctantly, worried Jude had forgotten his keys again, only to find an unfamiliar gentleman clutching a thick folder. "Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Anthony Giles, Social Services," he stated. "I'll need to speak with you about the incident on the 16th. Before I could protest, he stepped inside, flicking open his folder dramatically to begin his interrogation. As Mr. Giles bombarded me with patronizing questions, implying my guilt, fury and frustration welled up dangerously. But I knew reacting emotionally would only legitimize his suspicions. So I calmly recounted my factual innocence despite his transparent agenda against me. Fortunately, he left empty-handed, but warned further outbursts would involve children's services regarding my ability to safely parent. Shutting the door firmly against his retreating back, hot tears finally spilled down my cheeks. The realization crashed over me. To save myself, I had to abandon this house of lies. No matter the cost. I awoke well before sunrise, Jude's whistling snores grating in my ear. Slipping silently from beneath the sheets, I tucked my pre-packed bag by the front door and contemplated my next move. Today was the day. I would finally confront Jude about the cruise brochures and love poems stashed in his gym bag that confirmed my worst fears. For weeks, an unshakable feeling in my gut whispered Jude was having an affair. When traces first surfaced, I rationalized them away, not yet ready to destroy our already fractured bond. But the mounting evidence now demanded action. As I brewed coffee, I had no intention of drinking. My mind raced through potential scripts for the impending confrontation. Jude often left his work phone unattended on the counter, my chance to gather final proof. When I heard the buzz of a new text notification, my pulse quickened. I tapped the phone gently, stomach churning as the lock screen preview exposed everything. Lurid messages from a contact named Lola Peach filled the screen, leaving nothing to doubt. As I scrolled in horror, hot tears spilled down my cheeks at the graphic descriptions of past rendezvous and enthusiastic plans for reconnecting post-cruise. In that moment, something severed deep within me. The tenuous threads still clinging to hope or denial now snapped entirely. I backed away from the damning device, resolve cementing. Today the pretense would end. I busied myself with mundane tidying, awaiting signs of life from the bedroom. Before long, Mara emerged scowling. News of my resignation last week from the volunteer board she convinced me to join had earned persistent cold shoulders. "Morning, Mara," I offered politely. Her responding sneer said everything. As she shambled off to the couch, Jude finally surfaced. I steeled myself for the showdown ahead. "Jude, do you have a minute to chat?" I asked as casually as possible. He glanced at his watch distractedly while gathering work items scattered around the kitchen. "Can it wait, babe?" "Big presentation today," came his dismissive reply. In the past, I would have uttered a timid, "no problem," before sending him off with a forced smile, but not today. "I'm afraid this can't wait," I said, firmly blocking his path. "We need to discuss your upcoming cruise and Lola Peach." I watched the color drain from his face. "What are you talking about?" he sputtered unconvincingly. "I don't know any Lo." "Save it," I snapped. Months of suppressed rage now roared loose. I'm done with your lies. I saw the disgusting messages you left open on your phone. How long did you think you could keep screwing this whore behind my back? His lips pressed into a rigid line. Before he could reply, an anguished wail erupted from the couch. We turned to see Mara stagger toward us, heaving with dramatic sobs. I can't bear this cruelty, she cried. Jude, she's set on destroying this family over pure fantasy. Jude rushed to comfort her, while casting me an icy glare that screamed, How could you upset my mother this way? In past arguments, Mara weaponizing her emotions could shame me into silence, but her histrionic meltdown only hardened my resolve now. Without another word to either of them, I stepped outside, slamming the front door with an earth-shaking finality. As my Uber sped away, I grasped the full reality of what I was fleeing, a pathological narcissist twisted by jealousy. Her weak-willed puppet son, so easily manipulated. Their toxic delusions threatened to subsume me completely. Well, not anymore. Today my emancipation began. In the weeks following my dramatic exit, I immersed myself in dismantling the intricate web of lies Jude and his mother had woven. Meticulously documenting their misdeeds became my obsession. I dodged Jude's endless calls and texts, ranging from righteous indignation to desperate pleas for reconciliation. Responding emotionally served no strategic purpose. Instead, I quietly retained cutthroat attorneys and private investigators, methodically building irrefutable cases of infidelity and slander. With my evidence nearing courtroom-ready status, I decided the time had come for a final confrontation on my terms. I invited Jude and Mara to meet at a posh restaurant downtown, sending the address anonymously to pique their curiosity. Right on time, I spotted Jude entering with Mara clinging possessively to his elbow. Good, they took the bait. Allowing them a few minutes to settle uncomfortably at the table, I finally made my entrance. You actually came. Bravo, I announced acidly, relishing their shocked expressions at my abrupt arrival. Without waiting for a response, I opened my briefcase and theatrically flung 2 manila folders onto the tablecloth, their damning labels clearly visible. Folder 1, Infidelity. Folder 2, Emotional Abuse and Slander. Jude visibly paled while Mara's razor-sharp eyes narrowed. Whatever nonsense this contains holds no weight, she scoffed. You always were drama queen. Ignoring Mara's delusional barbs, I focused intently on Jude. The folder contents will speak for themselves, but allow me to summarize. For the next excruciating half-hour, I calmly detailed Jude's long-running affair and sexting habits backed by photographic evidence, private investigator reports, and credit card receipts. Mara sputtered baseless denials until Jude finally admitted guilt in a choked whisper. Well, she drove you to it, Mara shrieked. A wife should meet her husband's needs to prevent wandering eyes. Slamming my palm violently on the table, I cut her repulsive tirade short. You will not defend his behavior. He is a grown man responsible for his abhorrent choices. Turning my glare back to Jude, I continued, and according to the investigator, Lola Peach is just one of several women you've maintained relations with. Jude hastily tried placating me by questioning the ethics of hiring spies, but my bone-chilling stare silenced further protests. After a few moments, I resumed my diatribe by exposing their slanderous hoax, portraying me as violent and unstable. I have signed affidavits from the responding officers and social workers strongly disputing your perjured claims, I concluded, shoving the paperwork toward them contemptuously. Watching Jude visibly withdrawing into his seat like a scorned child while Mara seethed quietly was profoundly satisfying. I rose calmly from my seat, gathering the damning evidence now scattered across the table. Consider this your one warning to cease spreading vicious lies about me to salvage your shredded reputations. I still have ample ammunition left if necessary for courtroom proceedings. Leaving them speechless amidst the upended wreckage of secrets and lies, I strode briskly towards sweet freedom. The bindings tethering me to their dysfunction now dissolved fully. I was finally free. Watching the moving truck disappear around the corner, I sighed deeply. The bittersweet pang of signing the divorce papers just hours earlier still lingered, but any residual heartache faded, standing here on the curb before my very own food truck, its cheerful teal paint gleaming brightly in the afternoon sun. My hard-won independence never tasted sweeter. In the 18 months since I confronted Jude and Mara with their deceitful transgressions, much had changed. With an excellent attorney's help, I leveraged the extensive documentation of Jude's philandering against any sympathy for Mara's fictitious abuse claims. The judge took a dim view of their elaborate hoax and utter lack of remorse, as he deemed in the divorce proceedings. Stripped of his polished veneer before the court, Jude acquiesced quickly to my terms, eager to avoid further public scrutiny. The settlement awarded me full ownership of our lavish apartment and 75% of all remaining assets. Jude slunk away in disgrace to lick his wounds, Mara in tow. She had attempted clinging to false reconciliation promises, but I wouldn't be moved. In the quiet aftermath, I blossomed in solitude's fertile soil. My writing career flourished now that energy formerly spent tiptoeing around volatility could be channeled into professional and personal growth. I traveled widely, cultivated new friendships, and most importantly, I cooked. Having rediscovered my passion for fusing flavors during darker days, I began hosting pop-up dining experiences from our apartment. My culinary skills, coupled with charming hospitality, quickly attracted a cult following. Soon, devoted patrons clamored for my signature roasted duck confit tacos and cardamom creme brulee well beyond makeshift dinner parties. When the owner of a failing food truck approached proposing partnership, the universe seemed to align perfectly with my entrepreneurial visions. I invested a chunk of savings into revitalizing the charming little hut on wheels into a truly eye-catching mobile kitchen. Bold teal paint and twinkling string lights attracted droves of curious admirers from the outset, but perhaps most satisfying was discovering genuine romance unexpectedly. During my first promotional photo shoot for Alara's, I clicked instantly with the talented photographer Graham over sharing travel tales while scouting locations. Our coffees afterwards kindled into deeper connection. Unlike Jude's love bombing, Graham's affections grew steadily out of genuine compatibility and mutual respect. On our recent trip celebrating the new truck launch, Graham mused the stunning vineyard views looked ideal for a small, intimate vow exchange someday soon. My heart fluttered hearing this wonderful man, with no ulterior motives, speak so earnestly of our future together. Just then, my reminiscing was interrupted by the loud rumble of the first guest's arrival, my dear friend and unofficial catering assistant, Eva. She had proven an invaluable pillar of support when other fair-weather friends scattered after my dizzying descent from corporate executive's wife to scandalous tabloid feature. I embraced her warmly. "Well, no backing out now," I joked. "Did those glowing Instagram stories I sent over pique your interest?" "Are you kidding? I've been craving duck tacos all week after that preview." She laughed. "Now stop keeping me from that sublime food and go wow all these strangers." Grinning broadly, I fired up the grill with infectious enthusiasm. Tonight marked the genesis of my hard-won new existence, one defined not by toxic gazes or dancers hiding in the wings waiting to step on broken dreams. Instead, possibility and autonomy shone brightly, their rays feeding seeds for whatever rich future I chose to cultivate next. One scrumptious taco at a time.